Right, so today's lesson is looking at parallel lines and angles within parallel lines. So the easiest analogy of parallel lines is looking at railway tracks. Parallel lines are lines that have the same distance between them all the way through their length. So in other words, they'll never cross in the way that railway tracks carry on forever uh, in the same distances. If things aren't parallel, eventually they will cross. Even if it's a subtle difference in angle, eventually they'll cross over. So parallel lines are like railway tracks. And particularly, we are looking at uh, single lines that cross parallel lines and the angles that they make with those lines and the relationships between them. So before we go any further, you should have watched 3 videos talking about corresponding angles, alternative angles, and co-interior angles back on the OneNote lesson page. If you haven't watched those, you need to pause this video, go back and watch those, and carry on because I'm assuming that you know about those for this video. Um, so the key thing, the summary from the video is that corresponding angles are equal and they make F shapes. The alternate angles, which make a Z or an S shape, are equal. And lastly, co-interior angles, which make a U or a C shape, are equal as well. The other key thing to take from the from those videos is that that single line is called a transversal line. So for a parallel line, 2 parallel lines, we're talking about a transversal line that crosses both of those lines. And obviously that transversal line needs to be straight. The other key thing is looking at parallel lines. We signify them by using arrows on those lines. And if you've got more than one set of parallel lines, they'll signify that with a double arrow for the second one. So that's a few bits and pieces to talk about the notation and things like that. The other thing is the shorthand for talking about corresponding angles of parallel lines, alternate angles of parallel lines, and co-interior angles of parallel lines. The shorthand is what you can see in that yellow box. So what we're going to focus on now that you've got a good understanding of all those things is finding the angles between them. So parallel lines we know remain the same distance apart. We've got our transversal line, and that creates 8 angles around that transversal, the intersection of the transversal line and the parallel lines. So you can see we've got the circles there, which are vertically opposite each other. We've got the squares, which are vertically opposite. And also with those rules, we know that vertically opposite angles are equal. But also we know that all those angles are equal as well. So corresponding angles, which are the squares, alternate angles, which are the circles, and lastly the co-interior angles, which sometimes called the interior, simply the interior angles, are supplementary or add up to 180. So that leads us to the questions that we can answer. Is that simply, if we have a question like this, we say x is equal to 135 degrees, and then because that makes our Z shape, and then giving our reason that it is angles of parallel lines, and we're done. We can do that for corresponding as well. We make an F shape, so x must equal to 42, and that's because corresponding angles on parallel lines. And lastly, co-interior. We know that x must be equal to 180 take away 60, which equals 120, and that's co-interior angles on parallel lines. And that's because it makes that U or C shape. So there are obviously the simple cases. They start to get a little bit more complicated using the rules. So if we start off looking at this diagram, you can see the red lines are the parallel lines. The other lines aren't parallel because they don't have, so obviously this one and this one, because they don't have arrows on them. So we have to use a combination of the rules to try and work out answers. So if we take a look starting with X, and it's not always the case, but if you follow the actual missing letters by alphabet, it usually tells you the path that you need to take to work out the answer. So if we take a look at X, what do we think is the value of X? That's right, it is 80 degrees. And that's because of the internal angles of co-interior angles of a parallel line. Then looking at Y, is there a way we can work out Y? So yes, Y is 60 degrees. So, and that's because Y is vertically opposite to X. And then, so we've got 80 here, we've got 60 here. It's always a good idea to draw on the diagram so it makes the numbers a lot clearer. And then obviously with Z we can use co-interior angles to work out that that should be 120. So that's a combination. If we take a look at another example. So here, again, following the pattern, X, hopefully we can work out that X is 105 degrees. And that's because it makes that F shape. Next, Y is alternate to 55, so this must be 55. Now Z, it sort of brings up the question with Z, how can we work it out? Now, if we take a look at the straight line here, it's supplementary with 55, so that adds up to 180, but also we know that it's a co-interior angle as well. That it should add up to 180. So you can work it out either way, that it's 125, and the reason we've given is internal angles of a parallel line, co-interior angles of a parallel line, but you could use a straight, the supplementary rule or the straight line rule as well. So taking a look at this one, is that you can use the same ideas parallel lines using for quadrilaterals. So if we take a look at this shape here, okay, it's actually a trapezium because we've got one set of parallel sides, which we've looked at before. So if we take about away the extra lines, we end up with this. So we can use the same rules. So obviously X and 95 make up a co-interior or make up 180. So you end up with 85. 85 plus 95 is 180, and 60 and Y must be 120 for it to be 180 as well. So here we have a parallelogram, two sets of parallel sides. So what I want to do is pause the video, have a go at trying to work out what X, Y, and Z add up to. So pause the video now. Okay, so hopefully you gave this one a go. The key thing to note, because it's a parallelogram, you can create a C or a co-interior angle from this side. You can create it there as well because they're all parallel sides, but also this side and this side are parallel. So if we change to a highlighter, so what that means is that those two angles, so Y and X, make a co-interior, and 55 and Z make a co-interior as well. So what we end up with is X must be 125 because 55 and 125 makes 180. But then because 55 and Z makes 180, sorry, Y, and so that must be 55, and then we end up with 125. So you remember that was one of the rules we looked at when we were looking at quadrilaterals, that the opposite angles are the same, and it's because of those double parallel sides. So it's another one where we're sort of getting to the point where we're knowing enough rules that they sort of cross over. So again, here's another series of letters A through to H. So again, I want you to pause the video, give it a go, and try and see if you can work out all the angles through A to H, and hopefully you can grab one of the rules out of there as well. So pause the video now. Okay, so hopefully you gave that a go. So first thing we can do is look at A. We can work out A is 58 degrees, and that's because it's vertically opposite 58. Now we've got that this angle is 90 because it's a right angle, so we can use this angles in a triangle to work out that this one's 32. Right, looking at C, again we've got 90 and C should add up plus 58. Should add up to 180 because that makes a C or a co-interior angle. So if we do that calculation, we end up with 32. And I should have worked that out already, but it also makes a Z shape with B. So it's an alternate angle. But again, sort of illustrates the point. There's more than one way of solving these questions, and you can choose your way, and there's no necessarily right or wrong way as long as you end up with the correct answer with the right reasons. So then we've got 90. So for D, makes a straight line here. So 90 plus 32 plus D must equal 180. So that means D must be 58. And again, another way to do it is to do that A and D are corresponding angles. So you could have worked it out that way. Now moving on to E, again it's a straight line, and E and D are vertically opposite each other, so we should be able to work out that that's 58. So we end up with 58 here. Moving on to F, we've got our straight line, so you could go 70 take away 58, meaning that we end up with 52 degrees. Which angles on a point, so you could add them all up to work out from 360 or use the straight line. The last one is looking at G and H. Now they're going to be the same size, so in other words G is equal to H. That's because we have an isosceles triangle. So those two sides, red sides there, are the same length, noted with the little cross hatch there. So what we can do for that one is it's 180 take away 52, which is equal to 128. half of 128, so 64 and 64. So really well done if you manage to get your way through the whole lot there and get all those angles correct with the correct rules. If not, it might be that you used a different rule in a different place or anything like that. That's fine. But if you didn't manage to get the angles, try and trace your steps back and try and think about how you're linking those together. Okay, so that's the end of the video part. So there is a couple of worksheets that you need to complete on the OneNote lesson page. If you could go to that now, please.